and welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kang Tae-ri in Seoul. President Park Geun-hye and visiting Chinese President Xi Jinping held talks in Seoul on this Thursday, where the two leaders reaffirmed their commitment towards their strategic cooperative partnership and shared their positions on North Korea's nuclear program. For more, we are connecting live to our presidential office correspondent Choi Yoo-san for more. Yoo-san.
Chetty, in their joint statement, Presidents Park and Xi assessed how far they've come in terms of the blueprint for their joint development, which was set up during President Park's state visit to Beijing last year. During the joint press conference, which ended moments ago, the two leaders said they agreed to take their strategic cooperative partnership to the next level by increasing high-level political and security meetings, making them regular events, and increasing defense cooperation for regional stability. On the economic front, Presidents Park and Xi agreed to join efforts to conclude their free trade negotiation by the year's end and to open their currency trade markets to spur bilateral trade and investments. Seoul and Beijing signed a deal to guarantee increased protection for each other's citizens visiting their countries and decided to designate years 2015 and 2016 as Visit China and Visit Korea years. Cherry?
I see now, Yoo-san, as expected, of course, the North Korea nuclear issue took up a big portion of the summit talks. So what was President Park and Xi's key message for Pyongyang?
Well, in their message towards North Korea, Presidents Park and Xi expressed their firm opposition to nuclear weapons development here on the Korean peninsula and said that the peninsula's denuclearization must be achieved through the six-way dialogue. Now, they're talking about the six-party talks involving the two Koreas, China, Russia, the U.S. and Japan, which have been suspended for more than 5 years now. Although North Korea's possible fourth nuclear test was not specified, the South Korean presidential office says today's message is certainly a step up from last year's use of the phrase grave threat regarding the North's nuclear program. By stressing the six parties' 2005 statement and UN Security Council resolutions on the North's nuclear missile programs, Beijing is thought to have reaffirmed its commitment to imposing sanctions related to North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. And the two leaders, by agreeing certain conditions must be met before returning to the negotiating table with Pyongyang, they deliver their message to the North that it needs to show its commitment to give up its nuclear arms first. The Chinese leader also positively assessed President Park's trust-building process with North Korea, which highlights a normalization of inter-Korean ties and humanitarian exchanges between the two Koreas on a path towards a peaceful reunification. Cherry?
Yes, it's exactly all about the language. And another highly speculated security issue on the agenda was Japan, of course, its recent historical backtracking and recent move to expand its military role in this region. But Seoul and Beijing didn't exactly specify this in their statement.
Well, in their joint statement, the two leaders certainly they talked about expanding opportunities to study documents related to the Japanese military's sexual enslavement of women during the Second World War, mostly from Asia. Regarding their relationship with neighboring Japan, the two leaders said that the trilateral cooperation was essential to achieving co-prosperity as well as stability here in Northeast Asia. This has been Choi Yoo-san reporting on the summit talks between President Park Geun-hye and visiting Chinese President Xi Jinping. And I'll bring you more details on the summit as well as the press conference on the next newscast.
All right, Yoo-san, thank you very much for that report. Now, before sitting down with President Park today, Chinese President Xi offered his thoughts on the summit in a piece that appeared in Korea's major dailies on this Thursday morning. It encouraged greater cooperation with Seoul and Beijing and expressed high hopes for this summit. Yoo Li-an tells us more.
Chinese President Xi Jinping begins his piece with a traditional Korean saying, "It only costs 3 straw bags to buy a house, but 1,000 to get a good neighbor, emphasizing the importance of having good neighbors. He goes on to say that Seoul and Beijing have been able to build a healthy relationship based on trust, adding the two should always be able to freely exchange opinions on areas of mutual interest. President Xi also calls economic cooperation the main focal point of Korea-China relations and says China is aiming to expand its economic ties with Seoul through speedy negotiations on their bilateral FTA. As for his visit to Seoul, he writes that he hopes the two leaders will share friendship, discuss cooperation, and preserve peace. His words were echoed a day earlier by Korean President Park Geun-hye during an interview with China's CCTV, where she expressed hope that the visit will bring relations between the two to a new high.
이번에 시 주석님의 방한도 더욱 그 내실화 있는 결실을 많이 거둬서 두 나라 관계의 신뢰와 또 우호 관계가 더욱 깊어지리라 그렇게 생각합니다.
When asked about Korea's ongoing historical dispute with Japan, President Park simply said Tokyo needs to have a correct understanding of history. She also accused Tokyo of trying to undermine the 1993 Kono Statement, which was its official apology for forcing roughly 200,000 women into sexual slavery during World War II.
국가 간의 신뢰를 저버리는 일이고 또 국제사회의 그 준엄한 그런 그 어떤 목소리를 무시하는 그런 행위라고 생각을 합니다. 그래서 일본은 이제라도 어떻게 역사의 수레바퀴를 되돌릴 수는 도저히 없는 것이기 때문에
Japan's recent attempts to revise history and economic cooperation between China and Korea will top the agenda of the summit between the two leaders. Yoo Li-an, ARIRANG News.
Now, on the sidelines of their summit, the two countries' leaders talked business as well. The two countries inked a deal to allow direct trading of their local currencies. This is to slash transaction costs for companies on either side of the West Sea and reduce foreign exchange risks. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Korea and China have been trying to settle their exports and imports in their own currencies in light of their growing trade. China is Korea's largest trading partner, while Korea is China's third largest trading partner. Last year, the trade volume between the two countries totaled $230 billion, with Korea posting a $63 billion surplus. Up until now, only 1% of Korean companies settle their trading bills with their Chinese partners directly in the Chinese yuan, because only those already holding enough yuan could do so. Under the currency deal, exporters and importers from the two countries will no longer have to pay transaction fees when converting the won to the yuan, and vice versa, since there's no need to convert into the US dollar. The new arrangement is expected to cut Korean traders' business costs by at least 3 to 5%. It would also help reduce potential exchange rate risks. A researcher at the Korea Capital Market Institute says the deal will make Korea's financial market more attractive to foreign investors as well.
The deal with China is expected to enhance Korea's financial and industrial brand image with the growing use of the yuan in international trade.
The global trade volume settled in the yuan amounted to 4.6 trillion yuan, or $741 billion last year, up 58% from a year earlier. In addition to the currency deal, China is reportedly considering allowing Korean financial institutions to invest directly in China's capital markets by granting them investment quotas of up to $13 billion. China has similar quota deals with Britain, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Now, the media spotlight is not just on the president himself, but also his wife, who is accompanying him on this trip to Seoul. She's almost as well known as her husband, and her fashion style in particular has made headlines around the world. Song Ji-sun tells us more.
She is the Michelle Obama of the world's second largest economy and has been referred to as the Carla Bruni of China for her past career in entertainment. It's Chinese First Lady Peng Liyuan, who was once more famous than her husband for her regular appearances in an annual CCTV New Year's gala. Unlike her predecessors, the former singer and performer has been outgoing and active in her role as China's First Lady. The world's 57th most powerful woman, according to Forbes magazine, is also a goodwill ambassador for the World Health Organization. Selected to the International Best Dressed by Vanity Fair magazine last year, everything Peng wears makes headlines in fashion magazines and immediately sells out. Peng is scheduled to visit palaces in the Korean capital and attend cultural events during her 2-day visit, and will be on her own for most of her itinerary while her husband holds talks. To show around the city, the presidential office of Cheongwade has tapped current senior secretary for political affairs Cho Yun-sun, who will serve as Peng's personal tour guide during her stay. 송지선, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, the other two major players in Northeast Asia are cozying up on their own. Japan and North Korea are moving along with their recent agreement to reopen the probe on Japanese abductees in return for lifting some of the sanctions on North Korea. Connie Lee has more.
Following months of government-level talks and an agreement made back in May, Japan will ease some sanctions on North Korea. This in return for Pyongyang's commitment to reinvestigate the abductions of Japanese citizens in the 1970s and 80s. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe did not elaborate on which sanctions will be lifted, but told reporters on Thursday that this was merely the beginning of more things to come.
Under the principle of action being repaid with action, I want to lift part of the sanctions Japan has imposed. However, this is just a start.
The bilateral sanctions that Japan could be lifting include travel bans to and from Pyongyang, restrictions on how much money can be sent or brought into the communist state, and port calls by North Korean ships to Japan. In 2002, North Korea admitted to abducting 13 Japanese citizens in the 70s and 80s to help train their spies. Pyongyang called the case closed after returning 5 people back to Japan and declaring that the 8 others were dead. However, Japan has since disputed that and believes even more people were kidnapped.
The abductee issue is a very serious human rights issue and something specific to our country.
Now in 2014, North Korea says it is launching a new committee to look into the case. And according to the Sankei newspaper, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will oversee it.
We have been informed that North Korea has completed its preparations and is ready to begin, so we think they indeed will do so.
Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
Pyongyang is not ready to take no for an answer. Less than 2 days after South Korea turned down a proposal out of Pyongyang to end all cross-border hostilities, North Korea has reached out again. A piece published Thursday in North Korea's state-run Nodong Shinmun paper said Seoul should take Pyongyang's peace offering seriously rather than questioning its motive. North Korea on Monday proposed that both Koreas stop slandering each other and suspend all military hostilities. Seoul turned down the offer just 1 day later, calling it nonsense and insincere.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chae-ri for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. President Park Geun-hye's plan to reorganize the government following April's ferry disaster that left more than 300 people dead has hit a snag. The goal was to put a bigger emphasis on safety issues, but opposition to the plans has picked up. Ji Myung-gil reports.
President Park Geun-hye has vowed to disband the Korea Coast Guard over its poor handling of rescue operations as the Seoul ferry sank. In its place, the president wants to create a new government body charged with safety and rescue affairs under the office of the prime minister, which would serve as the control tower in future disaster situations. Under the plan, the Coast Guard and the National Emergency Management Agency will be absorbed into a new government agency on national safety. But the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has already registered its objections to the plan. Instead, it has proposed keeping the Coast Guard and the National Emergency Management Agency intact and establishing a full-fledged safety-related ministry. It also suggested the National Security Council under the presidential office become the control tower of all disaster and safety-related issues instead of the Prime Minister's office. Under the NPAD plan, the Coast Guard and the National Emergency Management Agency would still be responsible for safety issues, including rescue work at sea and on land. The party is also calling for a removal of the Coast Guard's authority over investigations and intelligence gathering on land. However, the ruling Saenuri party is unlikely to give in to the NPAD's demands. It says the opposition's opinions will be heard, but that more weight must be given to the government's plan. Kim Young-gin, ARIRANG News.
Korean businessmen's current woes are now down to the local currency that many expect will breach the psychologically important 1,001 level against the U.S. dollar later this year. The domestic economy, already suffering from slow domestic demand, is expected to take a major hit from this trend. Hwang Jie has the details.
This company exports clothing to around 10 countries like the United States and Japan. It receives orders from foreign buyers around 5 months before it actually ships the products, and the foreign exchange rate is not moving as they expected.
Back then, we thought the local currency would be trading at the 1,100 level, but it's about to breach the 1,000 level, and we are taking a massive hit.
It's local small and medium-sized exporters like this one that remain vulnerable to the strengthening of the won, unlike large companies, which can dodge currency fluctuations by diversifying settlement currencies and raising overseas production.
The Korea Federation of Small and Medium Business says that 9 out of 10 small and medium-sized exporters saw their profitability drop in May due to the strong won. The local currency has been continuing its appreciation trend since then. Making matters worse is that the currency woes come at a time when domestic demand remains sluggish, with Korea's economic recovery relying on a gradual export-led process. Experts say the strong won trend is casting clouds on the overall domestic economy.
The won is the only currency that's strengthening among major currencies, while the global economy is not picking up pace. So the strong won trend could dent the nation's exports and eventually slow its overall pace of economic recovery.
While many agree that the won is undervalued, experts point to the pace of appreciation and say if it strengthens too fast, local exporters won't have time to prepare for the change. Hwang Jie, ARIRANG News.
It looks like Korea's head coach Hong Myung-bo will stay in his job despite a disappointing Brazil World Cup where the team turned in its worst result in 16 years with 1 draw and 2 losses. In a press conference Thursday, the Korea Football Association said it was not fair to heap all the blame on Coach Hong. He will likely remain in this role until his contract expires after next year's Asian Cup. Appointed to lead the national team less than 1 year before the World Cup, Hong came under fire for selecting players that he's worked with closely in the past, despite their poor form or lack of match time at their clubs. From South Korea-China relations to a relationship between a high-profile Chinese actress and a well-known Korean director. Chinese movie star Tang Wei and Korean director Kim Tae-yong are tying the knot. The news has taken China by storm since being announced yesterday. The country's biggest portal site, Sina.com, which first reported the story, had more than 200,000 comments on the engagement as of Thursday afternoon. Some were witty, including one that said Tang Wei was President Xi Jinping's present to Korea. Others asked for Korean actor Kim Soo-hyun, who is enormously popular in China, in return. Tang and Kim first became friends on set of Kim's 2010 movie, Late Autumn. The body of the Palestinian teenager found dead in the West Bank has been laid to rest amid growing fears of further violence between Israel and Hamas militants there. With more on this story, Paul is joining us from the news center. Paul, what were the circumstances behind this teenager's tragic death?
Well, officials say 17-year-old Mohammed Abu Qadar was last seen being forced into a car in the occupied West Bank early Wednesday. His body was then discovered later that same day in a forest in Jerusalem. The news triggered violence in East Jerusalem and the West Bank as angry Palestinians threw rocks at Israeli security forces, while militants fired dozens of rockets and mortar shells into Israel.
They kidnapped him, took him, and left. The guys chased him. They went in the direction of Ramot by the train tracks. The whole road is covered in cameras. The guys called the police. They came immediately and told us, so we called the police. They didn't help at all.
The attack came just one day after Israelis buried 3 teenagers believed to have been kidnapped and killed by members of Hamas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the death of the Palestinian teen as despicable murder and promised a thorough and swift investigation. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas called on Israel to punish the Israeli settlers he said were behind the killings.
Now, West African health ministers have gathered in Ghana to discuss how to deal with the world's worst outbreak of the Ebola virus. What should we know about this deadly disease?
Well, statistics are alarming. Ebola is highly contagious and it kills up to 90% of infected patients with paralyzing fevers. It's transmitted through contact with the blood and other bodily fluids of both animals and humans. There is no cure, and health officials say the current epidemic is showing no signs of slowing. Meeting on the sidelines of a global forum in Accra, health ministers from Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia called on international agencies for much-needed medicine and other supplies. But those working on the front lines in the fight against the virus say the biggest challenge have been fear and lack of understanding, with many patients fleeing hospitals and going into hiding.
Have challenges that are not so much related to institutional capacity, but they are serious, to pose a serious threat to our campaign against the disease. And these are issues like ignorance, illiteracy, denial, and just culture, tradition, and to some extent even some element of politicization.
The World Health Organization says the impact of this outbreak has been phenomenal in terms of loss of human life and poses greater risks for social and economic health of the continent. The outbreak has so far killed over 400 people since February, marking it the largest and deadliest ever.
And finally, the U.S. is beefing up security at overseas airports over concerns of terror bombings as the country prepares to celebrate its Independence Day on July 4th. Paul, what kind of new security measures are we talking about?
Well, a U.S. official reportedly said some of the new enhanced security measures would involve additional inspections of passengers and property over the next couple days. They'll be implemented at airports in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, which run direct flights to the States. The Department of Homeland Security made the announcement on Wednesday, but it did not reveal what triggered the extra precautions. They did say they were sharing relevant information with among allies and consulting with those in the aviation industry. Law enforcement agencies are also in talks with European authorities to install additional bomb detection machines. National security sources say the main concern is that al-Qaeda groups in Syria and Yemen have been working together to develop explosives that would circumvent airport security screenings. Officials are especially worried that the recent success of the ISIS militant group in Iraq have attracted fighters from Western countries to the jihadist cause. Operatives with passports who could gain easy access to flights to American cities. Chetty?
All right, Paul, thank you very much. Always good to have you with us, and we'll see you back here in just about 2 hours. Now let's check on the weather with our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, it's been raining all day here in Seoul and similar conditions in most other regions as well.
That's right. A heavy rainfall warning continues to be in effect for parts of Gangwon-do province. At the moment, 10 to 20 millimeters per hour of heavy downpours are coming down along the northeastern coastal regions, and the showers will mostly clear up by tomorrow. But in the meantime, less than 5 millimeters of precipitation should fall in the central regions through later tonight. Otherwise, tomorrow is shaping up to be another hot summer day with daytime highs peaking mostly in the low 30s. On to Friday's readings. Seoul hits 31, Daegu and Gwangju reach the high 20s. As for other places, Jeju makes it to 26, Dokdo to 22. That's all I have for you this hour, and back to you, Teddy.
Bo-kyung, thanks so much. And that will do it for this edition of ARIRANG News at 8. Thanks for watching, and do join us again at 10 p.m. Korea time for Primetime News.